Thank you so much for joining us. Please tell us, how did you get here? Has it always been arbitration, or there was something else in the pipeline?
So the way the UK system works, I don't know if others have told you this, but basically it's like a seat rotation system where you do 6 months. And actually, at the very beginning of my career, I did a whole year as a transactional lawyer, but I always had an eye on disputes and arbitration in particular. So by the time I'd done a year of sort of transactional work, I was kind of angling for disputes and arbitration in my particular firm, and sort of getting as much experience as I could, and sort of trying to get into that area. But it had always been an area that I had an interest in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And is it competitive to get into the disputes team?
It generally is. I think, especially when there's quite a lot of areas that are transactional or advisory, and arbitration and disputes, maybe they only take a handful of people. I think definitely you need to show specific interest in that area, and sort of put your hand up and go for every opportunity. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. So with your experience, did you have to learn on the job, or you had to do courses to be qualified to be, able to do all these different things in arbitration?
So it's pretty much learning on the job.
Okay.
There's no sort of arbitration specific course that I did. I think it's as an English lawyer, there's different steps that you can take to advance in terms of advocacy experience, which I think is important if you're looking at arbitration, because I think arbitration practitioners are expected to get on their feet and do their own advocacy. So, for example, I think fairly soon after I qualified, I did the higher rights course to become a solicitor advocate, and I think that kind of thing, preparing yourself for advocacy in a arbitration context or civil litigation context is important. But beyond that, I think arbitration, really, you have to pick it up and learn about it on the job.
Right. And what are some of the trending areas now in arbitration, in your view?
So I think if you're practicing arbitration in Europe, in the current circumstances, you have to be thinking about sanctions specifically, and how sanctions affect the whole gamut of the arbitration process, but also the kind of disputes that you might be involved in commercial arbitration, and think about how it might affect how the arbitrators act, how the arbitral institution acts, as well as the content of the dispute that's being the subject of the arbitration. Sanctions are affecting so many companies and so many areas of business, that I think it's important to be alive to that.
And I'm sure in your area of work you've come across some areas where probably you didn't have prior knowledge about those areas. How did you tackle those particular cases?
Well, I think that's a big part of being a sort of general arbitration practitioner, which is sort of where my career's gone a little bit. It's about being flexible and picking up not just new areas of technical knowledge that you might need to approach particular disputes, but also really the rules that underlie your arbitration, even the area of law, the type of the jurisdiction and governing law that you're dealing with is going to be different. So I think it's a question of drawing on other colleagues as well that you have, and a bit of humility, especially coming from for example, I'm from a common law background, being an English lawyer. But there's when I'm practicing civil law, I have colleagues who have much more experience than me
Right.
in that area, and you've got to ask questions, you've got to learn about it, and you've got to know what the expectations of a tribunal practicing civil law might be as opposed to common law.
Right.
And so it's, starting from scratch, challenging your assumptions, and asking your colleagues and asking questions,
Right.
and not sort of moving forward on the assumptions of your of the legal background in which you were trained.
Right. So you have to have more of an international feel and an international outlook to your work as well.
I think that's absolutely right. Yeah.
Right. Talking about international, there are so many international conferences now on arbitration, on ADR, and sometimes as young arbitration practitioners, you are wondering, which one should I go for? How do you pick which conference to attend?
Yeah, it's there is like a sort of a glut of so many different things that you could attend. I think it's a matter of picking some areas that you're particularly interested in. It might be a procedural quirk of arbitration, or a legal area that you're interested in, just go to those conferences and meet the people there. It might be an area that you've come across in practice. There are all kinds of tricky issues. I mentioned sanctions, but also procedural complications like parallel arbitral proceedings about the same dispute. Those kind of things come up a lot, and it's good to focus on an area that you're interested in, go and see what the people practicing and dealing with those particular issues have to say.
Right. And when you go for such conferences, what's the approach to networking to get the most out of it?
I think it completely depends, but I think it's just a matter of people know and expect you to network. If you go up to someone, introduce yourself and shake their hand, I think it's completely. I think British people in particular can be a bit anxious about it, but at these conferences, I think it's absolutely expected that you put your best foot forward and just meet who you want to meet.
Right. And what are some of the skills, over the years, probably people you've seen or you've had to hone them yourself, what are some of the skills that you think arbitration practitioners should have?
So I mentioned a bit sort of flexibility of approach, keeping an open mind, I think is one of the most important things for arbitral practitioners. You just don't know who the tribunal are going to be from the beginning of the dispute, and if you haven't come across them before, you don't know what their approach or expectation is. So you have to be flexible. Don't judge. Don't have the expectations of your home jurisdiction when going into an arbitration. So that kind of flexibility is most important. And then as for the skill that you should be working on, I think from the beginning of a young arbitration practitioner's career, you've got to be thinking about advocacy and the ability to get up on your feet and put forward your client's case. I think that's just fundamental to being a good arbitration practitioner. And there's opportunities to find to develop your skills in that from the beginning of your career, whether it's moots or cross-examination. I think every opportunity that you find and take will ultimately benefit you in the hearing room when you're doing it. So look for those opportunities and develop those skills, because those you really can work on almost in isolation. Whereas if you're in international arbitration dealing with a different type of law, a different type of rules, you can't really plan for what's coming in through the door next to a great degree.
Right. Thank you so much for your time. We are almost at the end of our interview, and I'd like you to look into the camera now. Yeah, that part. And just tell us 3 things that you think young people should do to make sure that they have a great arbitration practice. I mean, now and for the future.
Right. I think three tips that you could take are, firstly, know your jargon straight away. Know the difference between an award and a judgment, and sort of learn the kind of legal framework. Knowing all those ideas like the lex arbitri and the lex fori and those differences. I think just getting a handle on that sort of framework by which arbitration works, that is so different from standard litigation, is really going to put you one foot ahead. And I think also, let's say those are 2 points, and the third is just get experience doing advocacy as early as you can in your career, and keep developing your style and your confidence in that area, and you'll be, it will improve your skills as a lawyer, but then ultimately as an advocate when you're doing it in the hearing room.
Thank you so much, Adam. Now, Adam, if you're not, in the office working on arbitration, what would we find Adam doing?
I'm a big movie buff. I love. I'm big into watching all the films that come out.
Latest releases.
Yeah. There's actually quite a lot of movie talk in the office. We're all movie heads.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you so much, Adam.
Great.
And it was a pleasure having you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much, Ryan.
Welcome. Done.
Great.